You would think that no one could ever surpass your dad when he is the main attraction, but his daughter may be demonstrating that this is not the case. This powerhouse of the future generation is changing the definition of standing tall, both practically and symbolically, so forget about wrestling legacies. Even her father, who is 7 feet tall, is in awe of her stature, presence, and confidence. However, how well known is Big Show's daughter now? And might she one day succeed her father as heir? You'll be amazed by what you're about to discover, so stay put. The incredible ascent of a giant Paul White. On February 8, 1972, Paul White was born in Aiken, South Carolina. And he was everything but normal from the start. Acromegaly is a rare endocrine condition that results in abnormal development from birth. Paul's physique started growing at an uncontrollable rate. He was already a 6 feet 2 inches, 220 pounds preteen with chest hair by the time most kids were learning to ride bikes. Not only was his size obvious, but it changed his life. Even the physicians were taken aback by Paul's size by the time he was in his early teens. He eventually gained some control over his own body when doctors successfully operated on his pituitary gland in the early 1990s to slow its rapid growth. As a 7', tall, 383-pound guy with a 64-inch chest, a size 22 ring, and feet that needed bespoke 225E shoes, he was still larger than life even at that point. It was impossible to live a normal life. He didn't fit in with airplanes. Car rentals were a joke. To make daily travel easier, he rented a tour bus with his own driver, in typical Big Show flair. White soon discovered that being the older child could be both a benefit and a drawback while growing up in Batesburg-Leavelle, South Carolina. He was a tight end in football and a dominant center in basketball at Wyman King Academy. However, following a confrontation with his coach during his freshman year, he left the team and joined the cheering squad out of pure resentment. He ended up making one of the best decisions of his life. Paul was driving a van full of cheerleaders under the direction of a chain-smoking mother who was deaf in one ear, while his friends were sweating it out in claustrophobic buses. He went on to say that it was the best experience of his life. White's basketball career continued at Northern Oklahoma Junior College after high school, where he averaged 14 points and 6.5 rebounds per game, earning him all-conference accolades. Before moving to Wichita State University for the 1991-92 season, he guided his team to victory in their Oklahoma Bi-State Conference division. He wasn't finished yet. White joined the fraternity Tau Kappa Epsilon after relocating to Southern Illinois University Edwardsville in 1992. In his few games with the Cougars, he scored 39 points. All signs led to a basketball career, but destiny had other ideas. He worked as a bouncer, bounty hunter, and even a phone answerer after graduating from college before he ultimately gave in to the calling he couldn't ignore, wrestling. He spent $5,000 training at the renowned Monster Factory run by Larry Sharp, but his stay was short-lived because of Sharp's illness. A lot of heart and little training. He carried that into his debut match, which he lost by countout in a World Wrestling Association event in New Jersey in December 1994. But there was no denying his potential. A scout who thought his audition tape belonged to someone else rejected his first attempt to get a job with the World Wrestling Federation, or WWF. However, fate intervened through a surprising link. Hulk Hogan was introduced to him by radio host Danny Bonaduce while he was employed at a karaoke business. Hogan connected the tall young man with WCW CEO Eric Bischoff after noticing his magnetism. Everything changed with that introduction. The Giant was born when Paul White formally signed with World Championship Wrestling, or WCW, in 1995. Billed as Andre the Giant's son. The soaring growth of wrestling from the Giant to the Big Show. One of wrestling's most successful careers began when Paul White made his professional wrestling debut at WCW's Slam Bore in 1995. He defeated Hulk Hogan for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship at Halloween Havoc later that year, and Jimmy Hart disqualified him to win. The Giant had come, but the title was eventually revoked. The audience was aware of it. The locker room was aware of it. He was unstoppable by 1996. Hogan and Randy Savage were defeated by White and Ric Flair. Defeated legends like Sting and Lex Luger to win and defend his first official WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Young and strong, He demanded attention everywhere he went. However, affiliations changed like sand as a result of WCW's disorganized storytelling. Attracted by wealth and celebrity, he quickly joined the New World Order, or NWO, and sided with Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash. However, a few months later, the most well-known clique in wrestling turned against him. White persisted in fighting his way through the chaos despite betrayal after betrayal and quarrel after feud. He had grown weary by 1999. "I'm fed up with the politics, the disparity in compensation, and the ongoing backstabbing that goes on behind the scenes." He allowed his WCW contract to expire on his 27th birthday. The jump that would permanently define him was what followed. He literally burst through the ring as Vince McMahon's secret weapon against Stone Cold Steve Austin at WWE's St. Valentine's Day Massacre that February. He wasn't the huge this time. WWE fans had never seen someone like him before, and he was the Big Show. Big Show moved from villain to champion to fan favorite in a matter of months. The visage changes nearly as quickly as his triumphs. He defeated Triple H and The Rock at Survivor Series 1999, took Stone Cold's place after he was injured, and won the WWF title. Most wrestlers only dream of reaching such a career milestone. But the gold belts weren't the only part of Big Show's story. It had to do with evolution. He had to constantly reinvent himself in a field that required it. Though he could turn around and perform a vicious rivalry against luminaries like The Undertaker, Kane, and The Rock, he portrayed comedic parts like the showster, imitating Hulk Hogan's moves and even dressing like him. He was transferred to SmackDown after being selected to Raw in 2002, when he accomplished the unfathomable by defeating Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series to snap his winning streak. His position as one of WWE's most powerful powers was solidified by the incident. The consequences of becoming the Big Show were still being felt, though. Every year, the physical strain, the frequent travel, and the body slams began to weigh more. He made the decision to step back in 2005, concentrating more on acting, TV, and, for the first time, his family. For a man whose life had been nothing but movement, it was a rare moment of peace. Because the genuine giant found his serenity outside of the ring as a husband, father, and changing man, while Paul White created his empire inside. The negative aspects of Giant Dom. Big Show has struggled with his size outside of the ring as well. Paul White's body was more than just a place he inhabited for the majority of his life. He had to make it through it. He appeared invincible due to his height of 7 feet. Behind the muscle, the celebrity, and the enormous presence, however, was a man who was silently trying to come to terms with the one thing that most defined him, his body. Backstage, a casual talk would turn into a life-altering event. There was no plot or script, just a genuine incident that forced one of the biggest names in wrestling to take charge of his life in a way that fans never anticipated. This was not about a hero becoming evil or a villain becoming good. It wasn't amusement. This actually happened. A war fought in solitude, away from people and cameras. A tale of self-awareness, discipline, and a giant who at last learns to accept himself. Paul Big Show White has never been like the others. Both his pain and his power came from that divide. He weighed 220 pounds and was 6 feet 2 inches by the time he was 12. He appeared to be an adult stuck in a child's world. Adults were unsure on how to interpret him. When he came near, parents would yank their children away out of fear of this monster child who looked too enormous to be true. Beneath all that bulk was a boy who yearned to fit in. Although the rejection was painful, it made him more resilient rather than weaker. His outlet was sports. Football, basketball, anything that benefited from his size. And he wasn't the outsider for the first time. The star was him. He was suddenly valuable because of the same body that made him feel weird. He never lost that attitude. So it was a natural fit when wrestling came around. He was no longer Paul White. He emerged as the main attraction, a 500-pound monster capable of subduing anyone. It was a power-driven character, and it was effective. The audience adored it. The moniker stayed. Before long, he was doing more than simply pretending to be the big. He was experiencing it. For years, he thought that size was the key to his success. He did better the larger he got. Or so he believed. However, what made him unstoppable quickly became intolerable. It was no longer strong to carry more than 500 pounds on a 7-foot frame. It was a form of discipline. His mobility deteriorated, his joints hurt, and just being the star of the show became a chore. Being the biggest man in the room had become his whole identity. In his heart, though, he began to question whether that identity was killing him. Finally, it dawned on them. He was terrific without having to be the biggest. The extra weight didn't matter to him. He needed to find equilibrium and have the guts to make a change. An unplanned conversation with John Cena was the source of that flame. Backstage, it began as innocuous chat between two veterans. However, during their back and forth, Cena said something that was more powerful than any blow White had ever received. It stuck even though it wasn't mean, it was just a matter of fact. White felt challenged at that very moment, not by Cena, but by himself. He made the decision to demonstrate that a giant could change. He started his metamorphosis that week. He lost 90 pounds in a little more than a year. Considering his size, that was enormous. It wasn't exhausting exercises that caused the weight to drop. That was practically impossible due to his hip pain, but he was able to discipline himself by eating. He totally changed his diet, substituting dedication for comfort food. It wasn't simple. He had always relied on food as a comfort food, a coping mechanism for loneliness, stress, and holidays. However, he discovered healthier ways to find solace and how to treat his body with the same decency that he expected from others. The outcomes soon spoke for themselves. No one expected to see the world's biggest athlete with noticeable abs in place of the belly that had defined his silhouette. The fans were taken aback. The other wrestlers were shocked. For White, however, the change was about more than appearances. It was about taking back his authority, his confidence, and his health. Later, Cena only nodded his agreement when he spotted him. Silent respect, the kind you get when someone performs something you didn't think they could do, without any words or praise. White chuckled about it, but beyond the humor was pride. He had accomplished the unthinkable. What it meant to be the Big Show had been reinvented by him. Because, in reality, he never had a major altercation with another wrestler. It went against the stereotype he had lived with for many years. The giant who had always displayed strength had at last discovered true strength, not in size, but in self-control. Paul White was able to stand tall without having to be the Big Show. At last, he felt at ease with his true nature. Perhaps that is the true story here. That the expectations that accompany it can occasionally be more burdensome than the physical weight a person is carrying. Paul White saw losing that weight as more than just a physical change. Freedom was what it meant. The scandals that caused fans to shudder. There is always a backstory that the public is unaware of behind every legendary figure in professional wrestling. Furthermore, Paul Big Show White's narrative isn't just about winning gold and striking victory postures. There have been many incredible high points in his career, as well as strange low points and instances that have left admirers wondering what they just witnessed. Big Show's path demonstrates that being a big does not make you invincible, as evidenced by his on-screen mishaps that made even ardent fans uncomfortable and his real-life run-ins with the law. It simply makes it more difficult to overlook your errors. Let's turn the tape back. Paul White was on the wrong side of headlines in December 1998, long before he rose to prominence as one of WWE's most identifiable figures. He was detained by the Memphis Police Department for reportedly exposing himself to a female motel employee. The event caused a stir right away. All of a sudden, a behemoth in every way was portrayed as a scandal. The case, however, never stuck. White got away with it after the charge was withdrawn due to insufficient evidence. Just 3 months later, scandal struck once more. He was charged with assault in March 1999 following an alleged confrontation with Robert Sawyer. White was accused of breaking Sawyer's jaw during a fight in a hotel in New York. After being shoved and intimidated, White insisted it was self-defense and not an attack. The judge agreed after 3 days in court. Not at fault. The case is over. But there was a stain from those early run-ins with the cops. The kind that, particularly when you live your life in the spotlight, never really goes away. However, the mayhem didn't stop there. Because Big Show was battling through many dubious creative choices within the ring while he wasn't juggling headlines outside of it. He is literally a punchline that WWE loves to utilize. Additionally, Big Show always took one for the team, even while some wrestlers refused to be degraded for a plot point. But not all of those moments held up well over time. Consider his notorious yes-chanting period. WWE believed it would be shrewd to have Big Show take up the chant for himself while he was at odds with the authority in an attempt to capitalize on Daniel Bryan's surge in popularity. Fans, however, weren't having it. The audience became chilly as Big Show's rendition felt forced, and they chanted, "Yes, we'll always belong to Bryan." Then he had his AEW moment, which even he acknowledges was a complete failure. White attempted to operate the scale like a proper official during a weigh-in portion between Cody Rhodes and Anthony Ogogo, but it didn't go as planned. Awkward pacing, malfunctioning equipment, and an all-out meltdown occurred. White later didn't hold back. "Fucking disaster," he said. It was the kind of train crash that could not be saved by editing. However, it wasn't nearly as bad as that. Who could overlook the 2015 Royal Rumble's conclusion? Roman Reigns and The Rock were jeered by the night's supporters. Fan favorites were eliminated one after another until Reigns' final obstacles, Big Show and Kane, were booked. The contest produced irritation rather than drama. Big Show once again became the face of WWE's creative blunder as the audience turned on the entire spectacle. Then there was that match versus Sheamus in the chairs that will never be forgotten. WWE promoted it as a titanic battle of physical prowess, and Big Show added a real huge chair to the mix. The large prop appeared more ludicrous than menacing, despite the fact that it was supposed to be terrifying. Supporters were torn between cheering and laughing. And it wasn't the only embarrassing circumstance that Show has encountered. Big Show took offense when Tori Wilson chuckled during his on-screen humiliation during the SmackDown segment. He pursued her backstage for an entire episode, culminating in a scenario when he almost tossed her off a ledge. Kurt Angle, who attempted to stop him, was tossed off instead. Yes, it was over the top, but that was WWE at its most insane and unadulterated. The tranquilizer dart followed. Yes, you heard correctly. Kurt Angle blasted Big Show with a tranquilizer pistol, shaved his head while he was unconscious, and left him bald in yet another over-the-top storyline. It was supposed to be humorous. Rather, it turned into one of those times that fans sighed about. Nothing compares to the anarchy of 2006, though, which you can only explain by saying, well, it was the early 2000s. DX, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels are eager to humiliate Big Show, Vince McMahon, and Shane McMahon inside Hell in a Cell. The scene became really uncomfortable somewhere between the steel and the hysteria. Big Show's equipment was pushed down while Vince's face was pressed squarely against his ass, trapping him between the ropes. A reference to McMahon's former Kiss My Ass Club stunt. Indeed, but it was one of the most embarrassing images ever seen on WWE TV. Even so, it doesn't compare to his early days in WCW, when the ridiculousness reached a new height. The Giant, as he was then known, competed against Hulk Hogan in a sumo monster truck match on a building's roof during a 1995 pay-per-view. Hogan unintentionally knocked him off the roof as the segment came to a close. After watching the Giant fall to his death, fans saw him appear minutes later, fully recovered, and compete in the main event. No justification. Just unrepentant WCW mayhem. The diaper appears just when you believe you've seen everything. For a commercial promoting the first Raw of the year, Vince McMahon once created a large show outfit as a New Year's baby. Bonnet, full diaper, everything. Shaw subsequently acknowledged that it was the most embarrassing thing he had ever done in his professional life. And who could argue, really? However, the moment Big Show was caught making out with Vicky Guerrero on live television is the one that best embodies WWE's penchant for the bizarre. One of the most awkward plotlines ever created resulted from what was supposed to be a startling love triangle featuring Edge, Cena, and Vicky. Fans were just perplexed, not shocked. Big Show continued to make appearances despite every controversy, difficult situation, and outright degrading segment. That's what's so intriguing about his narrative. He stayed where most wrestlers would have left. Professional, devoted, and dedicated to providing entertainment, regardless of how absurd it became. The woman who tamed Big Show's heart and the Giant's romantic life. Paul Big Show White, a 7-foot mountain of muscle who easily smashed opponents and towered over anyone who dared step in front of him, was renowned for years as the unstoppable force. However, most people never notice the Giant's gentler side when they are away from the lights and the cacophony of the audience yelling his name. This is the side that is solely Bess Catramatos's. Big Show's romantic life was far from ideal prior to Bess's arrival. In 1997, he wed Melissa Pavias, his first wife. However, the marriage did not survive. Things had begun to unravel by the year 2000, and by the year 2002, it was formally over. Despite the breakup, being a father was still one of the few things that really anchored him. The couple had a daughter, Sierra. However, when you least expect it, life has a way of changing the course of events. Paul White remarried a few days after his divorce was finalized, but this time he married a lady who would fundamentally alter the course of his life. Bess Catramatos is her name. Bess was more than a mere romantic interest. The calm in his storm was her. She was a former Illinois model who saw something completely different when she met the man everyone knew as the Big Show. The man below, not the wrestler or the entertainer. Bess was born on July 13, 1973, and was raised far away from the insanity of the professional wrestling industry. Her early years in Illinois were modest and uncomplicated. She was an idealistic young woman who aspired to tour the world and have her face featured on magazine covers. And she brought it to pass. Her innate elegance and beauty led her into the modeling industry, where she established a strong reputation and led the kind of life that most young girls can only imagine. However, everything changed when she met Paul. The runway lights, the photo shoots, the glitzy existence. She left everything behind in order to create a new kind of empire. One based on family, love, and loyalty rather than fashion or celebrity. They had a unique love story. Not even close. It was quick, intense, and transformative. Because of his strong bond with Bess, Paul made one of the most difficult decisions of his life, ending his first marriage. Bess then gave up something of her own. She left the limelight and entered his world. A world of demanding travel plans, never-ending shows, and uncertain celebrity. She wasn't just his partner, though. His anchor was her. Every great wrestler has a support system that helps them stay grounded. And that's Bess for Big Show. Bess was behind the curtain, keeping their family together while the cameras followed him as he battled legendary opponents like John Cena and The Undertaker, reminding him that there was more to life than the ring. They had an unbreakable chemistry. Fans soon realized how much she had influenced his equilibrium and serenity. Big Show has frequently acknowledged that she provided him with the steadiness he required when pressure, travel, and stardom threatened to overwhelm him. They created a fairly normal life together. A comfortable house in Tampa, Florida, where quiet evenings, children's routines, and laughing were all shared. In addition to Sierra, Paul's daughter from his first marriage, they have 2 children together. Even though he is regarded as the biggest athlete in the world, he is just a father at home. Bess handled parenting well. She decided to put her modeling career on wait in order to raise their kids and support her husband through the highs and lows of his wrestling career. She was more than just Paul's wife. His backbone was her. The constant energy that sustained him when the burden of being the Great Show became too much to bear. When Netflix debuted the Big Presentation in 2020, their romance even made its way onto television. Fans were given a humorous glimpse into Big Show's made-up home life through the family sitcom. The show had a dose of reality, reflecting the real man behind the character, even if it was lighthearted and humorous. Surrounded by those who brought purpose to his life. Bess has maintained her renowned privacy over the years, refusing to pursue celebrity and never requiring approval from the general public. However, those who know her, as well as those who have only seen her from a distance, may appreciate the quiet assurance of a woman who is aware of her value. Bess, who is 5 feet 8 inches, may appear small in comparison to her 7-foot husband. But don't be fooled, her presence is just as strong. They have created something unique in the entertainment industry. The marriage has endured over the years. Even the biggest celebrities need a place and someone to call home, as they continue to raise their family together more than 20 years later while pursuing serenity rather than fame. Catramos White is more than simply Big Show's wife these days. She is the lady who saw the guy behind the behemoth and decided to love both of them. She is his quiet strength and his grounding power. You know, even giants need someone to defend them. The daughter of Big Show is even larger than Big Show himself. You would assume that living in your father's shadow would be inevitable since he is the Big Show, one of the biggest and most well-known wrestlers in the world. However, his eldest daughter, Sierra White, is demonstrating that being huge is more than just size. It has to do with your presence, ambition, and mannerisms. Sierra may be even bigger than her father in that regard. Sierra was born on November 28, 1998, and grew up surrounded by the noise of arenas, flashing cameras, and celebrity. She hasn't let that environment to define her, though. She is quietly paving her own way rather than pursuing the dizzying stardom. Sierra has led a delightfully solitary life while attending the University of West Florida. Just focus, no reality TV appearances, no tabloid turmoil. Standing 5 feet 6 inches tall, he exudes an air of confidence that attracts others. She doesn't need the stage to demonstrate that she has her father's presence. Although she is known as Big Show's daughter, people who know her say she exudes the same poised strength that her father used to perform for decades. She is quietly but effectively making her mark in the real world while he ruled the ring. And that's the reason her narrative is so captivating. Sierra can stand out without being 7 feet tall. Grace, seclusion, and the will to transcend her father's history are already helping her do this. Because being larger doesn't always mean having more muscle or height. It has to do with exceeding expectations. And that is just what Sierra White is doing. Do you like Big Show? Tell us in the comments section below. Remember to subscribe, like, and share. Click the following video that appears on your screen as well. You'll like it.